Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 2005. We're going to be taking a look at Bonnie Raitt and Keb Mo, and they're going to be playing through No Getting Over You. So let's get Bonnie and Keb up on screen and see how they get on.
My TV, told a man cut off the phone, put an ad in a paper, babe, I'm gonna sell everything I own. Done everything in the world I know, try to make it through, but there's just no getting over you.
Now listen, bought myself a new strong hat, one eye popping under the brim. Oh, yeah. Bought myself a little seaside shack, in case I get the urge to swim. Tried everything I know to make it through. Now but I just ain't no getting over you.
Well, I tried and I tried, but honey, it ain't no use.
And I cried, I can't turn you loose, no.
Why can't I get you off my mind? Got that hook so far up in here, babe, I got to get you off of that line.
Oh, yeah.
Japanese.
That's right.
I'm just going to jump in here because that groove that we've got going through this track is so funky and it's something that you'll always get with Bonnie and Keb. So when they both play together, you're going to get such a great groove in the performance, and also the way that Bonnie plays slide guitar, the expression that she puts into her slide guitar, but the control she has, the vibrato. I did mention this in the other video that I did on Bonnie, but then I also said that I'd do another video that explains a little bit about her history as well. So that's what this video is going to include. But technique-wise, the way that on her right hand, she's got those finger picks that you'll see on the first, second, and third finger, and also the thumb pick on as well. And sometimes she anchors with that little finger on the guitar as well, just to get a little bit more control. But being able to play a lead guitar solo, whether it be slide or just fretted notes, takes so much more ability, so much more practice than just strumming out chords. And when you're analyzing something like this with Bonnie playing slide guitar, singing at the same time, it'll fly under the radar because of how easy it's made to look. But there's a hell of a lot of technique involved in this playing throughout this performance. The other thing that will throw you off is the quality of Bonnie's voice as well, the way that she has these throwaway lines but has such a great vocal, and you'll just assume sometimes that the guitar is being played by somebody in the background, but some of the lines that Bonnie throws in there with the slide are so cool, especially under Keb's playing when he gets into some lead work. Bonnie still throwing in some really classy lead lines in the background with that slide. And we just had that really tasteful solo played by Keb. And what I enjoy about this performance is the difference in tones and the way that Bonnie has that slightly more top end sound to her slide playing, but then Keb has rolled off that top end, so it means that he's got typically the neck pickup sound. So you get a great contrast between the two lead solos, and it helps to set them apart. Another thing that you might not notice about the top performers is that when they collaborate with another artist, they always fit the groove and the same feeling within the song that they might be playing, so they'll adapt their lead playing and their expression for that track. And that's exactly what we've got here, because Keb's solo and Bonnie's solo just blend together. It's not one of those situations where one of them is going to start shredding or playing something that doesn't fit the feel of the track. And that's what top players do. They have the ability to change their style and manipulate it to fit the track that they're playing over the top of. And this is a great example. And when you've got two players that sing as well, the vocals are treated in exactly the same way in terms of changing the stylizations to fit the composition. And Bonnie is one of those artists, of course, that can sell you a ballad. She can sing and hold a note for days, hit you with that controlled wide vibrato if she wants to. But for this composition, it's more of a talking vocal with throwaway lines and continuing the conversation between her and Keb. And Keb approaches it in exactly the same way. And just to talk about Bonnie for a second, because she's not one of these artists that had a lot of success in her teenage years and then had a really long career from then on. It was one of those cases of working for it for the best part of 20 years before she got her big break. But it all started in 1970, where she was playing stand-up bass for her brother. Actually, her brother was playing in a band. He was supporting Mississippi Fred McDowell at the time. And Bonnie started to get the attention of a reporter from Newsweek, and that reporter started to spread the word about Bonnie's playing, and it just so happened that scouts then started to attend some of these performances, and eventually Bonnie did accept a record deal and a record contract at Warner Brothers Records, and she released her first album in 1971, and that was self-titled Bonnie Raitt, and it was critically acclaimed. Critics loved it, but unfortunately commercially it didn't sell well. So in 1972 she released her second album called Give It Up, and again the critics love this album. In fact, now a lot of critics say that that was some of her best work, but unfortunately commercially it didn't do well again. And then the third album in 1973 called Taking My Time, that again went down really well with reviewers and critics, but commercially it didn't do well. And unfortunately, being talented like Bonnie is and was, playing slide guitar, being a great guitarist all round, having a great voice, being talented isn't a precursor to success, and this is what she found early on. Unfortunately, it was great music, great talent, and great ability, but it just wasn't selling. So in 1975, she released her album called Home Plate, and there was a definite move towards a more mainstream sound with that album. And in 1977 is when she released Sweet Forgiveness. And this album had a single on it that gave her a first taste of commercial success, because that was her track, or at least her reworking of the track Runaway. And that was a commercial success, but typically the critics didn't care for that track. And it's always the case that the critics love tracks and then they don't do well commercially, and then the ones that do well commercially, the critics don't really get into too much. But it was great because that got into the top 100 of the US charts, so it really was an upturn in Bonnie's fortunes. And due to the success of that track, a bidding war started between Columbia Records and Warner Brothers Records, because they were rivals at the time, and Columbia wanted Bonnie on their label, but Warner Brothers didn't want Bonnie to have a hit with Columbia Records, and they would do anything to stop that happening. So they renegotiated their contract with Bonnie, and just matched the offer that she had received from Columbia Records. So everything's going great. It's 1982. She's just renegotiated that contract and releases her album called Green Light. And it gets great reviews again, but unfortunately doesn't sell well. And this starts to hurt the relationship between Bonnie and Warner Brothers Records. And in 1983, getting towards the end of recording Tongue and Groove, which was going to be her next album, Warner Brothers Records just cleaned house, which means they dropped lots of their artists, and Bonnie was one of those. So in 1983, just a year later, she's now without a record label. So coming from that initial high of having her first taste of success to then recording a new album, and then literally within a year getting dropped from the label and having that album that she was working on shelved indefinitely. And this is the point where Bonnie had problems with drugs and alcohol, and it's totally understandable considering that high then to that extreme low that she went through. But also she got a message from the label 2 years later that they were going to now release the album that she was working on, and I think they felt sorry for Bonnie, or at least that's what she has said, because they let her go into the studio and rework it a little bit, and they released it as 9 Lives. Unfortunately, that didn't do well either, but I don't think it mattered all that much to Bonnie because she wasn't on that label anymore, so she wouldn't have been making any money from that label. And the reason that they were feeling sorry for her is that she was still getting out there, still playing as much as she could to try and keep her name in the public eye, and she was spending her own money to do that. But as we know, there is going to be a happy ending, but let's get back into this track.
I signed up at the cooking school. I'm gonna pick up all some hard cuisine. Got everything the world I know, just to try to make it through. But oh, there ain't no getting over you.
You know, Bonnie, I tried and I tried. I just can't turn you loose now.
I cried, just couldn't turn you loose.
Can I get you off my mind?
You're so far up in here, babe, I got to get you off the line. Oh, honey, I'm a fool for you, babe.
I can't get over you, darling. Come on now. Every time I see you, darling, I want to get more than I can get now. I see red, blues out in my bed, blues for breakfast. Lord have mercy, Lord, come on. You know I just can't get over you. Well,
there we have it. Great band. I mean, the performance all around here is just so tight, so spot on. But another thing that I want to mention about Bonnie and Keb is the fact that they are such consistent performers, not only live, but I mean throughout their whole careers, because keeping up the level is something that I mention in a lot of other videos where as artists advance in age, sometimes they lose their voice, or you get a watered down version of a track. Sometimes you get key changes where they take the key down in order to accommodate the voice that might have suffered a little bit over the years. But these two are absolutely on it throughout all of their live performances. But picking up the story where we left off, in 1987, Bonnie was a backing vocalist for the Roy Orbison special that was on TV, and that was a huge success. And she got into writing at this point. Now she was clean from drugs and alcohol, and she got into the studio under the supervision of Don Was. And Don was a producer for Capitol Records, and after this, she was really impressed with Don as a producer and asked if he would do her next album. And her management approached Capitol Records, and she signed a record deal with them in 1989. And in 1989 is when she released her album, Nick of Time. And this was the turning point, because it wasn't a gradual increase in her popularity. The album just went stratospheric. It went straight to #1 in the charts. It went 5 times platinum, and this was her 10th album. And Bonnie said that it was her first sober album. But in the next year's Grammy Awards, she got 4 Grammys, and also 2 years later, for Luck of the Draw, that album went 7 times platinum. So it wasn't as if it was a one-hit wonder in terms of the album. She was really laying into the charts. So after the success of that album, she walked away with another 4 Grammys in 1992. In 1994, Longing in Their Hearts, that album went to #1 and again was multi-platinum. That went platinum 2 times over. And then in 1998, her album called Fundamental went platinum again. So this prolonged success that she had in the late 80s and throughout the 90s really cemented her as one of the all-time greats. And her album in 2005 called Souls Alike, that went to #19 in the charts. And in 2012, her album Slipstream went to #6 in the charts. And then in 2016, her album Dig In Deep, that went to #11 in the charts. So it just goes to show the quality of her albums just charting so highly throughout those years, but also the quality of her work across her whole career, because let's bear in mind, throughout the 80s, she didn't have a label in that mid-80s period and had to finance her own career just to stay in the public's consciousness. And the fact that it all took off in 1989, she definitely deserved every single bit of success that she got, because she worked so hard for it, because she'd been going almost 20 years at that point. But a great performance here with her and Keb, and thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!